I'm Sue Garman, back with the Quilt Show again. Today we're going to talk about making flying geese. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to make them. Each way has its own usefulness for whether you want to make a few of them or a lot of them. So let's start with the foundation piece method. I have a foundation here that I'm going to stitch on to make my separate flying geese units. What I like to do is go ahead and cut out a bunch of different rectangles that'll fit across here. I'm going to be making a 1.5 by 3 inch flying geese unit. So I need to make these units bigger by at least a 1/2 inch, but I like to make them for paper piecing probably an inch larger because it gives you more flexibility with the seam allowances. As you know with paper piecing by now, you put your fabric on the back side, stitch on the top side. So I've got this in place across the flying geese area. It's this piece here. And then I'm going to add my triangle, stitch, having that seam allowance cross over the stitch line by a 1/4 inch. I'm going to stitch along that line. Then I come over, trim this off, flip it over, press it down, and then I'm ready to add the next triangle. It'll end up like this, so I start with it like this. Make sure it extends a 1/4 inch beyond this line here. Stitch along the line, trim the excess, flip it over, and when I'm done, I trim along the outside also, and I have a full set of flying geese. And again, I just pull the paper off. And remember, you're setting your stitch allowance, your stitches per inch very short so that it comes off very easily. I want you to remember when you're making flying geese that sometimes when you turn a corner, you have to make 2 that you can stitch on here so it can turn the corner properly. As you know, there are many ways to do flying geese. I'm going to show you a second way to do it. This one goes by various names. The ones that I've heard most often are the brawn panty or the bikini method. Okay, let's take a look at a flying geese first. This is the goose part. These are sky. So when I talk about the goose unit, I'm talking about this unit. When I talk about the sky, I'm talking about the side triangles that are on the side there. When you're making this is a 1.5 by 3 inch finished unit. We need to know your measurements when you're finished because that's how you determine the size of these. To make a goose unit, you will start with a square that is 1.25 inches larger than the finished size of your goose. So this is a 3 inch goose finished size. This is a 3 plus 1.25, a 4.25 inch square. Cut one out. The sky units are the size of your finished size, in this case 1.5 inches plus 7/8 inches. You need to cut 4 2 3/8 inch squares. That's 1.5 finished size of your goose unit plus 7/8 is 2 3/8. So cut 4 of those squares. You'll take each of those squares and with a pencil, you'll mark diagonally corner to corner. I just use a plain old pencil to do that. I use a mechanical pencil because it's got a finer line on it. Do that on each of your 4 squares. Next, you will take each of those squares and put them on top of your goose unit, 2 at a time. You'll line them up. You don't have to trim 3/8 inch off here. I do, but you do not have to. You just want to make sure that you go straight across, corner to corner, pin it in place. Next, you're going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from that pencil line on each side. Be very careful that it's exactly a 1/4 inch. Once you've stitched them, then you're going to cut it in half. You now have your bra or your bikini top. Let's finish it off. You'll take that unit when you've pressed it open and put another square, another one of your squares here across it. Stitch on both sides of the line, cut on the line, and you end up with a unit like this. And now if you see, you just fold this down and press it open, cut off your triangle nibs. When you're finished, you will have 4 flying geese units out of each of those squares. One more method now, let's take a look. If I'm making a finished size 1.5 by 3 inch flying geese, I want to cut the goose unit a 1/2 inch larger on each side. So this is 2 inches by 3.5 inches. I want to take the sky units and cut them a 1/2 inch larger than the short end of the goose unit. So if the finished flying geese unit is 1.5 inches, I want to make 2-inch squares. Then I want to take my mechanical pencil and a little ruler and go corner to corner diagonally across both of those squares. I start by placing one of those squares across the end of one of the goose units. I like to pin it in place. Then I'm going to stitch exactly on that line. Once I get it stitched, I flip it over. I make sure that it lines up. If it doesn't, I want to trim off the excess. I want to press it flat, and then I will take my scissors and cut away all of this excess fabric. Now I'm ready to start on the other sky part of this goose unit. I pin the square in place, stitch exactly on the line. Again, once I've stitched it, I trim the excess away, flip it open, cut off all my excess triangle nibs if there are any, and there I've got my finished flying geese unit. One more thing I want to show you. Flying geese are great for making flying geese strips if you're doing a flying geese border, but what if you want to use them for something else? Look at this sawtooth star. It has 4 flying geese going around the outside. Think about how you can use your flying geese units when you're making blocks. You make 1 flying geese unit instead of 2 half square triangles on each side. Next month, we're going to be finishing up. It's the last month of the Quilt Show's Stars for a New Day, and I'll show you some finishing tips and some quilting tips. Until then, have a good day. Happy quilting. It's a new day every day.